Hey, there he is.
Hi, Nick. How are you?
Good to see you. Hey, glad you could make it.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, no problem.
Looking forward to seeing the site.
Absolutely, absolutely. We got some good stuff. I'm Nick Tornato. I'm a professor of classical archaeology at the University of Michigan. I direct the Gabii Project, and this is the main excavation area of it.
Got it.
Let's go down in the first trench so you guys can take a look.
Okay, great. Can you give us some of the background to this area? What were the investigations beforehand, and what was the setup? What did this look like before you started to excavate?
Well, this looked like a big golf course when we got here. It was fairly clear where the city was. There had been surface surveys, but it was all grass. There was a little bit of an excavation that the Superintendenza had done. But this is a major city in central Italy, one of Rome's early competitors, but about which we know so little. We don't know where the Forum is, we're not even sure where the main temple was, so it really was, a big question mark. The outline of the walls had been more or less figured out in various ways, but what was inside the walls was not known. The surface surveys was showing something that the archaeology later confirmed, that the city was big, almost 70 hectares in the Archaic period, and then it shrank to much less than that by the late Republic and early Empire. So that was precisely what made us particularly interested in this site. There is a dearth of well-documented mid-Republican city layouts. So we thought that we could find something here that wouldn't be completely built over like you have in Rome or even Pompeii, which is great sites, but you have all this late Republican and early imperial stuff sitting on top of them, beautiful floors that you can remove. And this actually is paying off.
This is an incredible dig site, and there's so many people that are working in a large area. Can you tell us what some of the main features are that we can see here?
Well, from here you can see one of the things that we're very proud of, this mid-Republican house behind me. It has a tablinum and it has a courtyard that's built with massive ashlar masonry walls made of local stone. The floors are kind of, peculiar in that they are, they're sort of opposignum type floors, but then as they join the wall, they have a little raised edge, which we don't see elsewhere in Rome, for instance. And so we're pretty excited because this is really, we're seeing an example of, sort of formative stages of the Roman domus.
You are investigating the city of Gabii, particularly in the Republican period. What else are you discovering as you investigate the city?
Well, we're going back into the deeper levels of the city, which, goes back. We are fortunate enough that we have the necropolis from the city that was already excavated, so we know the city goes back as early as the 9th century BCE, at the time when cities in central Italy were just emerging out of chaos, so to speak. And so we're interested in figuring out how the city comes together. And we have several interesting stepping stones. We've got some very rich infant burials that we've uncovered that show aristocratic families burying their own children in state. We've got later 6th century BCE chamber tombs with massive sarcophagi, and again indicative of family prestige being displayed throughout the city. It's unusual. It was a surprise to find the 6th century tombs because they normally are outside the city walls, and we know that the city wall was already there by the 6th century. So clearly they're making exceptions, or they have some kind of ritual that we're not yet informed about. And then we also have habitation units like the one behind me that do not conform to the overall city layout that was probably created at the beginning of the 5th century. So we have evidence of how the city was before it was thoroughly reorganized and took the form that we see later on.
When I look at this site, I am just overwhelmed and impressed by the level of organization, the sheer amount of students that you have excavating here. What what is this involved in terms of organization? How do you have the excavation design?
Well, I'm grateful you don't see what goes on behind the scenes. And anyone looks organized. At this point, we have almost 90 people on the site. We have over 60, 70 students at this point, and a number of professional staff, graduate students, and specialists. We've uncovered almost a hectare, which is still only, a little over 1% of the total of the city, although this site looks enormous. We, of course, have a finds lab, which deals with the flow of artifacts that are excavated every day. We have an environmental lab that deals with the bones, seeds, charcoal, fragments. It also deals with soil analysis and various other techniques. We have a topography team. Everything is done with total stations. You won't see a tape measure anywhere on site.
Basically, our job is to record the spatial positions, so the location and the size and the shape of all the stratigraphic units that are excavated here on site. So all the walls, all the pavements, but also all the soil deposits and any finds whose location is meaningful. So when we find nails on a grave, we record that type of thing. And we do this with a total station, which is a fairly standard surveying instrument in archaeology now. And one of the nice things that we do at Gabii, which I think not very many excavations do, is we actually input our data from the total station into the database in the field right away. And we then print out plans of every individual stratigraphic unit that the excavators can characterize right away in the field. So they're able to draw on a kind of 2-scale sketch as they're excavating and as they're looking at the material. So that's kind of the basics of what we do.
So essentially, you're as much as possible you're going paperless within the actual trenches, or that the paper is being produced by the input of this particular data.
Yeah, so basically everything is input into the digital system, and in terms of publication, we are very much digital.
Flotation is a sort of a sampling strategy used to gain environmental information without damaging it. Wet sieving will just smash your charcoal. So we use water, we use a faucet head beneath sort of and in our arms to sort of stir the soil, get the soil matrix to drop through, and then it'll overflow out that orange tube, and that's the charcoal and seed will all float. They're lighter than water, and we'll collect that in this extremely fine 1/4 millimeter screen. And then there's a heavier screen we put in so that the tile, the ceramic, everything else in the floats will be sorted through later. So we make sure we capture everything. And then under the microscope, the seeds and charcoal, when they dry, will be analyzed to see, what they're growing. Sometimes how they're growing it, if we can see different parts of cereal grain processing, like the chaff parts, we'll know that nearby they were processing. Also environmental information, especially from wood charcoal, identifying the tree species and over time how that's changing, or the parts of the trees they're harvesting. So far this year I found a lot of barley and some wheat and lots of fava beans. But we'll find wild grasses, different, sometimes spice seeds, grape.
You're in your 5th year of investigation here in Gabii, and it's an enormous site, and there's so much to do. What direction do you want to head in the future years?
Because this is a site that we know so little about, we are going back to probably in parallel with the excavation, going back to surveying the broader city, this time with ground penetrating radar, and we're really hoping to be able to zoom in on the internal organization, on the individual city blocks, and so in 2 or 3 years from now we could be ready to hop over to another area of the city. And this time our dream is, of course, to also uncover an area of public structures, of, if not necessarily the Forum, but some of the public areas that must have existed in a big city like this, and that we are very poorly informed about, even from other cities. We don't know exactly what a Mid-Republican Forum would look like, what a Mid-Republican Basilica would look like. And so it could really provide some very interesting answers for this formative period in Roman architecture.
Thank you so much for having us here today.
Oh no, it
Really
was a
appreciate
pleasure
the
to have
tour.
you guys. Yes, yes.
Well, good luck with the rest of your season.
Thank
and we
you.
look forward
Thank
to
you.
reading about the
Try to stay
reports.
cool. Yes, absolutely.
Good luck with the heat wave.
Absolutely, absolutely. We'll try to stay safe. Bye bye.
All the
Take care.
best. Bye-bye.